Meet Codename Goose, your on-machine open-source AI agent, built to automate your tasks. Codename Goose is an intelligent and autonomous agent capable of handling complex tasks thanks to its core features. Connect with apps and tools you already use with extensions. Built on the Model Context Protocol, you can connect to extensions like GitHub, integrate JetBrains IDEs, access Google Drive, or build your own custom integrations for Goose. For a curated list of extensions, visit our docs. With a wide range of compatible large language model providers, you can choose and integrate your preferred model. You can also run Goose as a desktop app or through the command line interface using the same configurations across both. You can think of Goose as an assistant, ready to take your instructions and do the work for you. Able to handle a wide range of tasks across various engineering domains. Here are examples of tasks Goose has helped people with already. Goose has helped dive into a new project in an unfamiliar coding language, conduct code migrations such as Ember to React or Ruby to Kotlin, increase code coverage, and even generate unit tests for a feature, and much more. To get started using Goose right away, check out our quick start and be the first to know about upcoming features by joining our community.
What's going on, everybody? Happy time zone. Hope you're doing well. It's Thursday morning where I live, but might not be where you are. So welcome in to everybody. We are starting kind of a different sort of live stream thing that we're going to be doing on Thursdays called Vibe Code with me and Vibe Code with Goose. And I said I wanted to kick it off. So here we are. We're basically going to spend Thursdays with you, and we're going to show you kind of some ideas about how we do vibe coding. We may have guests, we may just go solo, but we're going to have everybody on the team kind of rotate through this on a week-to-week basis. So welcome in. Again, happy time zone. Let us know in chat where you are if you're hanging out with us today. And if you're watching after the fact on YouTube, definitely drop a comment. Let us know where you're coming from and what kinds of things you'd like to see us vibe coding on these streams. So camera's frozen. It shows me that it's coming through okay. LinkedIn does look frozen. Let me double check my camera. Yeah, I'm watching it on YouTube and it is definitely coming in blurry. I'm not sure why that's coming in blurry. Looks nice and crisp on StreamYard for me. Well, I'm curious to know, so this is kind of my code screen. Is that going to come through blurry? No, it comes through okay. Weird that my camera's coming through blurry. Not sure why that is. We'll try and diagnose that another time. Cool, but basically what I want to work on today is something really, really meta. I've been working on a lot of content lately on recipes in Goose. And the idea that I actually had presented to me this week from somebody at the company was, hey, I've been watching your videos on building recipes. What can I do about like looking through my existing workload in Goose and build recipes out of those? And I'm like, now I've got my idea for my live stream. Thank you. So kudos to my coworker for sharing that. And basically what we're going to build today is I want to build a recipe that tells Goose, hey, go through all my other sessions and build recipes based on the work that I commonly ask Goose to help me with. So for me personally, that cookbook of recipes would look like, help me come up with ideas for blog posts, come up with ideas for videos, come up with ideas for live streams, and so on. And that kind of thing could be parameterized, where it's like, I need an idea for blank, and we fill in that parameter with what that thing is. The kind of work that you might do in Goose would be very different. And so what we want to do is I want to build this recipe in a way that I can contribute this to our community cookbook so that all of you can grab this recipe and have it go through your own Goose and say, hey, go look at the work that I do. And so I want to write the recipe in a generic enough way that it's not expecting that you do blog posts and videos and live streams, but whatever the workload is that you do. And so the recipe kind of idea that I've got here in my editor is I want it to go through, look at our previous chat sessions, look for patterns of the work that I asked for help with, and then create a personal cookbook for myself. Now we're going to have to give it a parameter of like, where do we want those recipes put on our system? And how do we want it to analyze and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically kind of go back and forth between my editor and Goose, and I'm going to kind of start with my idea of vibe prompting. You can go check out our YouTube video if you want to go see my video on vibe prompting. And what I want to do there is just kind of have some conversation with Goose about, this is the setup. This is ultimately what the end goal is going to be. How can we get there before actually doing any work? Sorry, bonked the mic there. How can we actually set up that work in a way that once I then give Goose that prompt, Goose knows exactly what to go do. And so to try to answer like any potential clarifying questions, like what kinds of parameters do we need to put in this recipe cookbook generator? Things like the disk path of where you want the recipes. Do you need a README file? That kind of stuff. Or what kinds of things Goose should prompt the user for as it's running this recipe. So that's basically what I want to build on the live stream today, is I want to build a recipe cookbook generator that I can then give to all of you so that you can find ways of automating more of the work that you do. So let's get started. I think this will be fun today. Cool. So welcome in to everybody that's hanging out in chat. Definitely ask questions as we go. And we'll get going. All right, so let's go over to Goose and let's see what we want to do here in Goose. So again, I'm going to start with some vibe prompting here, where I'm just going to have a conversation with Goose and say, this is the ultimate goal, and what do we want to do? What do we want to do from there? Thank you, Tanya. Passed along a question from Discord. Can I dynamically execute it via a / command? So there are ways of running recipes in Goose. You can import the recipe so that you can run it over and over again. My idea here is this is probably a recipe that you would rerun maybe every couple of months to say like, hey, go clear out my old recipes, go build me a whole new thing based on my sessions. But it could also be that, once you build those recipes, you might want to clear out those old sessions because it will be kind of a heavy lift of like going through a lot of these things. To try to figure out what it is you want to automate in the first place. As far as running them, I believe there's a / recipe command that we can use in Goose. I know that there's, you can definitely run them in headless mode. You can do like Goose run. I can just show you that in the terminal. For example, we can do like Goose run -- recipe, and then we give it like the path to our recipe. And then that would be like a YAML file or a JSON file. In Goose itself, I know the / recipe command in Goose will actually go build a recipe. I forget if there's a parameter on here. Maybe the team can help me out in chat. I forget if there's a parameter here where you can give it the path to the recipe. I'm not sure whether that works or not. Sorry, I just realized that showing that chat message is actually hiding what I'm doing in Goose. I'm not sure if you can give it a path to the recipe here or not. I don't remember. I know / recipe, when you're in a session in Goose, will actually tell Goose like, hey, go build a recipe out of the current chat session. I don't know that there's a way to run it with a / command in Goose though. All right, so let's dive in. So again, I'm just going to have some conversation with Goose about the idea that I want to build here, and we'll see what we can come up with. So I want to build a recipe cookbook generator for Goose recipes. The idea here is that I can help the community by analyzing their Goose sessions and build recipes out of common workflows they ask Goose to help with. I'd like to have some conversation with you about how we can make this successful. So let's start by you asking me questions about what we want to build. For example, we'll need a parameter from the user, from the user about where to put the recipes. What other kinds of things should we ask the user for as we generate these recipes for them? Tanya is saying in chat here, let me pull this up. Slash commands are recent, still new to me too. Remember, remember them all. It's all, yeah. From the CLI, you can use the developer to run it, yeah. All right, so Goose thinks that this is an interesting idea, recipe cookbook generator. So what kinds of input sources, what types of Goose session data will they be analyzing? So let's see. We're just going to keep adding to the conversation. Then we'll have Goose, like once it kind of analyzes all this, we'll have Goose like, hey, go output a prompt that I can then give to Goose to go build us this recipe generator as a recipe. So it kind of gave us questions like numbered. And so I like to give my responses numbered. I don't know whether that actually helps the LLM organize its thoughts, but I'm just going to do that anyway. We'll need to determine disk path of where Goose stores sessions on the user system. It's probably, it's typically something like local share Goose sessions, something like that. It might be different on Windows. I know for Mac and Linux, it's definitely that path. I forget if Windows will store them in that path or not. And they will generally be .jsonl file format. I'm not sure what the L is on JSON-L, but let's see what else it asked. Recipe granularity. How specific or general should the recipes be? Should we create recipes for every specific task or more general patterns? We'll want to find common patterns in the work the user does to find ways of being clever to group up the work into fewer recipes, or maybe even use sub recipes where appropriate. And then for pattern recognition, how will we identify common workflows? So common workflows should be found by, let's see, this is going to be, we wanted to analyze all of the previous sessions. But for me, for example, I spent several weeks building out this recipe scanner for our community cookbook that runs on our GitHub repo for Goose. But I'd had a lot of sessions, like dozens and dozens of sessions. So I don't want it necessarily to come up with a recipe for that, because I'm probably not going to build something like that again anytime soon. But and so for me to run this, I would say I would need it to have a way to say ignore certain things. So common workflow should be found by analyzing the user sessions and maybe asking them directly which workflows to keep or discard. They might have workflows they don't need to do again. and don't need a recipe. So it's asking for similar use of intent, successful outcome pattern. Should we cluster things? Okay. User configuration, scope control, which of their sessions should be included? We should analyze all of their sessions and come up with ideas to present to the user about which ones to keep or discard. We kind of already said this in a previous one, but we'll just kind of reiterate it. For date ranges, let's look through all previous sessions. I'm kind of envisioning where a user might want to run this over and over again. Like if I come back and run this recipe every 3 months, I don't want it to regenerate recipes that it's already generated. So we might need to have Goose go look at the recipes it already made against sessions, or to somehow store like a cutoff date of like, this is the last time I ran this recipe cookbook generator. And so I only need to look at sessions since then to start. But maybe the recipe generator or recipe cookbook generator can keep track of the last date it ran. So if the user runs it again, you can only look at sessions starting at that cutoff date. That'll probably help it be a little more intelligent as far as how many sessions to go look at. The session files are stored in a date format, like the file name actually has the date in it. And so if we can have Goose track the last time this thing ran, then it should be able to kind of understand that cutoff date. So we'll go from there. Our prompt is getting huge already. Privacy and filtering has still got more to ask us. How do we handle sensitive information in sessions? Ask the user how they want to handle sensitive information. We don't want to bake that into the recipe. No, definitely pun intended there. API keys, passwords, and so on. That'll be up to the user and what level of privacy they want. So that'll be something that Goose will need to ask the user as it runs that recipe. Should users be able to specify recipe naming conventions? Let's start by naming the recipes ourselves. By naming the recipes yourself, maybe a future revision can ask the user for custom names. Template preferences for recipe format. Use parameters as much as possible. And so there's a template language that we use in recipes, and it's based on Python's Jinja 2, and I believe we call it mini Jinja. And that's like a Rust implementation of the Python library. And so we'll say we want to use parameters as much as possible, and mini Jinja logic controls for things like if and else and for loops if necessary. Again, if the user is trying to do something repetitive, like go look through all these files, we can just go get a list of files and then run that through a for loop. And then let's see, community contribution. Should there be an option to anonymize and contribute recipes to a community repository? We're not going to worry about that here. So we won't worry about the user sharing their recipes. They can make that determination on their own in the future. This recipe we want to give to the community. Like what we come up with here, I want to contribute to our community cookbook. But what Goose is asking us here is, hey, if I go build a cookbook for, say, Roselle or Tanya, should I have, like, should I build out those recipes in a way that they can then contribute those to the community cookbook by anonymizing things? I figure that can be a conversation they can have with Goose to say, hey, here's a recipe. How can I anonymize it to help the community? Because again, the stuff that you do with Goose might be And so we want people to share things in here. So definitely check out our Goose repo and help us out with that. Let me go get the repo here. I'll just leave this up on I'll just leave this up on the screen here for a minute. So definitely go check out our repo and contribute to our community cookbook. It would be fantastic. So I'll leave that up for just a moment longer. Actually, I'm going to show this one. So this link here is something that we are doing for the month of October, and it is Hacktoberfest. And so Tanya and Ebony have put together like a really nice structure in here to help you find some interesting things to work on with Goose. Everything from creating recipes for our community cookbook to how to improve Goose itself. So definitely go check this out as well. And I'll see if I can drop this link in chat here as well. To chat. So definitely go check this out, and I'll paste it over on LinkedIn as well. Definitely want to go check out Hacktoberfest and help us improve Goose and make Goose better for you, make it better for me, make it better for everybody. All right, back to what we have going on here. So what's your vision for how users would interact with this tool? Would it be one time or something continuously learn? I don't necessarily want it to continuously learn. So I think this generator recipe could be something a user runs every few months to grab any new workflows and build new recipes for themselves. All right, so let's see what this comes up with. And I'm using Claude 4 Sonnet on here. All right, so it's coming through a little bit more, giving me some more questions. What specific elements should we focus on? The user messages, tool calls, successful, failed attempts. So this is all really good information. So this is why I like the idea of vibe prompting before we get into vibe coding. In this case, the vibe coding is just going to be go build a recipe. So we're not actually going to be like writing code, but we do want like a tangible outcome here. And so the idea of vibe prompting is you're just having a conversation with AI about like, hey, once we do this thing, I want like a high chance of success. And so we're just having conversation. We're kind of answering all the clarifying questions here. With typical vibe coding, it would be like, go build me a tic-tac-toe game. And it goes in and builds that. And then you say, okay, well, now change that color to blue and change this color to red and do, I want these kinds of game mechanics. And it has to go through and reanalyze all the code that it wrote in order to know what to go change. Where here we're having a conversation. And so there's probably fewer tokens overall being used as you have conversation with your AI, as opposed to having it go analyze your code over and over again for the kinds of changes that you want to make. So my idea of vibe prompting is lower token usage, and then you don't have as much refactoring to do because you're kind of answering all these questions up front. Other companies like GitHub, they're coming up with things like spec kit and things like that, where again, you're having conversation about like what you want the AI to go build before it goes and builds anything at all. So let's see, Tanya's got a question here. How have recipes changed the way you vibe code or vibe prompt? Ooh, that's a good question. For me, again, the idea, like I try to automate as much as I can. And so as I'm having these conversations with Goose, I do like to try to turn things into recipes if I can. But oftentimes I'm going in and I'm tweaking the recipe and just making little changes here and there. But it's based on coming up with like a successful outcome in the first place. And so it doesn't really change how I vibe prompt. It's more kind of after the fact of now that worked, could I turn that into a recipe? And that's kind of what we're building here. And so when this coworker of ours suggested this idea, I'm like, oh yeah, this is what we need. And I want to build this in a way that I can give it to all of you. And now you can go generate your own cookbook based on your Goose sessions. All right, so let's dive back into the questions that Goose had here. So when we parse the JSON-L, what are we looking for? We're looking for overall outcome. If it was successful, we should try to build a recipe. If it was unsuccessful or seems unfinished or abandoned, sometimes I'll start a Goose session and then I just never get back to it. And so if it seems unfinished or abandoned, then maybe we don't Don't need to make a recipe for it. As far as tool calls and whatever, again, once it actually builds the recipe, then the user can kind of refine it from there. Pattern recognition, are we looking for similar sequences of tool calls? Look for similarity in the ask. What is the user asking Goose for help with? Does that seem repetitive? i.e., help me write blog post ideas or video script outlines or analyze code base for information, etc. All right. And then state tracking. Where should we store this metadata? We should store the last run date in the folder the user specifies where to store the recipes. Should we also track which sessions? Since the session files are named with the current date and time, the next time this generator runs, we only need to analyze session files newer than that previous run date time stamp. All right. So this is how I like to really refine what to go build, and then we'll go do the thing. All right, workflow presentation. How much detail should we show? Just a summary. Good. This is actually a good question. What do we want to present to the user about what it finds? Let's be concise with the output and just tell them the kind of workflow found that seems repetitive and ask them to confirm which ones to turn into recipes, because they may want to discard some. So let's give them a recipe name idea and a brief summary of a sentence or two about what the recipe would do, what kinds of parameters it would need. Sensitive information. What option should we give here? Actually, we got a question from Discord. Thank you, Tanya. Do I ever use voice input? Yes, but with what I'm doing here, because I'm using the microphone for the live stream, I know Mac can share the hardware. It would definitely speed things up. Absolutely would speed things up. I love that Mac and Windows both have built-in kinds of things. If you're on Windows, you can hit Windows H to start the transcriber. On my MacBook, there's a microphone over the F5 key. I think it's function F5 to activate that, and it'll go into like voice transcription mode. The core operating systems are doing a really good job now with voice input. There is a voice input plugin, I think, for Goose, or extension for Goose, where you can tell it to like listen to your voice and it tries to transcribe. But a lot of these things are being built into the operating systems now to where we may not really need that anymore. Let's try it. Let's see, function F5. Is that going to do anything for us? Nope. How about just F5? So nope. Anyway, I see a microphone over the F5 key on my keyboard on the MacBook. So I think there is a way to actually enable that and do voice input directly from the OS. I'm more familiar with doing that on Windows, where I absolutely use voice transcription as much as possible for sure. And yeah, Roselle has had people on the Great Goose Off do transcribing with voice, and it works really, really well. All right, we're getting close to actually running this thing. Looks like we have a couple more questions to answer, and then we're going to dive in. We're just going to tell Goose to try this out. I don't want to be here all day just writing prompts. For sensitive information, what options should we give the users? Detect where the user might have sensitive data. that out when you make the list of tasks you think would make good recipes and ask them for clarification on how to handle each. The generator recipe itself should not make that determination for them. So we don't want our high-level recipe to make that determination for you. You need to decide how you want to handle things like file paths and so on. Recipe parameters, should we auto-detect? Try to auto-detect where possible, but we should try to use parameters as much as possible with recipes and templates and template logic, etc. Because the whole point of using recipes is that we can use those placeholders and those markers inside the recipe itself for how we want to tell Goose to do the work. Should we check multiple possible locations for session storage? If you can't find the default session storage path yourself, ask the user for the disk path. And then the output format, any preference for the recipe file structure naming convention? No preference. The main recipes should be, actually, we'll just tell it to do everything in YAML. Write all recipes and sub recipes in YAML. Okay. At this point, I'm just going to say, oops. I was going to say, like, let's get started. All right, so it's going to go try to find the storage. It's going to check the last run timestamp and so on. And it's asking more clarifying questions. How should we determine if a session was successful? If you're unsure, ask the user. And then when we find similar asks, combine very similar requests, combine requests into fewer recipes with parameters where appropriate. All right, so it's asking fewer and fewer questions here. So I think we're getting close to done. For YAML, should we allow Goose recipe conventions? Yes, of course. Yes, follow Goose conventions. For the team, notice that it's coming back and capitalizing Goose here. That's probably coming from the LLM, but we do want to use lowercase Goose. But that's probably just coming from the LLM. It's probably not something we can change in the Goose app. And then and include a description, etc. So the recipe can be run. Be sure to add prompt information in case the user wants to run the recipe in headless mode. So when we run a recipe in the GUI, we don't need to have a prompt. We just need a list of instructions. But if it builds the recipe with just instructions, then it's not going to run in headless mode because it still needs a prompt in there. So this is basically saying, like, hey, when you build that out, make sure there's some kind of prompt in there. And then let's see, when should we create sub recipes? If a workflow seems appropriate for sub recipes, try to use those where possible. The other thing too is as it's building out these recipes is it could build a recipe that then utilizes another recipe that had been generated for the user. So that's kind of the nice thing about sub recipes is like a core recipe can access another recipe and treat it as a sub recipe. But that recipe can't then launch other sub recipes. So there would need to be a little bit of intelligence there. And then parameter detection. Parameterize the kind of core idea. Like if I'm routinely asking for help writing outlines for documents, blogs, videos, then that type of thing would be good parameter. Otherwise, params for disk path would be good. URLs, etc. All right. Should this be interactive? Yes. Because we will need the user's input. All right. Let's get started. Let's get started building the recipe generator or cookbook generator recipe. The cookbook generator recipe. So what I'm hoping this is going to do is it's basically going to go through and look at all these notes and then build us a YAML file that will be our recipe. And then we'll figure out from there. So it's going to start reading a to-do file. Okay, so it's building us a to-do file to kind of track what it's building here. Hopefully it's going to capture all those notes for us. And then I'll actually try and run this recipe on my own sessions and see what it comes up with. And then the outcome from here, basically I'll go through and I'll refine what that generator, the cookbook generator recipe looks like. And then I'm going to do a pull request later today and actually get that up into our community. So definitely watch our GitHub repo for that. Cool. Let me take this banner back off. So definitely go check out the banner down below, the issues for 705. That's going to be our Hacktoberfest. Definitely want to go check that out and participate. We got some fun swag that you can get as well. We've got a new swag store. And we've definitely got all kinds of fun stuff on there. So another question from Discord, what's the knowledge cutoff for Claude for Sonnet? Is Claude better than OpenAI for recipe knowledge? I don't know that one LLM is necessarily going to be better. Their training cutoffs are generally going to be probably newer than like really understanding like Goose and recipes and things like that. Typically what I would tell Goose to do is like, hey, go analyze your code and use that to build recipes. So there will be some amount of things there, and this is part of why I'm going to need to go in and refine what this cookbook generator recipe actually looks like, and just kind of fine tune things a little bit. Goose is going to get us most of the way there, but that's very similar with vibe coding, right? Your AI is going to go build 90% of the code. You still have to go in and kind of verify and like maybe touch things up, and that's what my expectation is here as well. As far as which one is going to be better. From a logic point of view or a creative point of view, I mean, I would typically use like OpenAI for more creative tasks, where I would use Claude more for like logical tasks like coding and so on. But I tend to use GPT for things like image generation or blog post ideas, because those, in my experience, tend to be better at creative types of tasks. All right, so the recipe structure is created. Key features, next steps. Should we test the recipe structure, start implementing? Would you like to test this recipe? I want to know where it put this recipe in the first place. Let's see, do I have a code editor? I have a code editor here. Did it put anything in? Oh, hey, there's our YAML file. Let's go see what this looks like. Analyze your Goose session history, automatically generate recipes. This tool examines your interactions. Perfect for capturing blah, blah, blah. I want to analyze the Goose session history. So there's the prompt. So if you do run this in Goose, it's actually going to pre-populate the prompt window with this. Find and analyze my Goose session files, identify successful workflows I use repeatedly. Let me choose which patterns to turn into recipes. Generate parameterized YAML recipes with proper templating, handle sensitive data appropriately. Ask me where I want to store them, guide me through the process, and then it's got its own parameters. So these are things that it will ask the user for, like, where do you want these output? Where is your session storage to begin with? Minimum number of times a workflow pattern must appear. Okay, it's giving us a default of 2. The user can kind of override that if they want. Include sensitive data check, whether to look for that. Cool, and then full set of instructions. Wow, this got really detailed in here. Recipe generation, try to use the templating. There we go. Where appropriate, generate sub-recipes that share common patterns. Finalization, guidelines, ask for clarification when unsure about success. Prioritize fewer, more flexible recipes over many specific ones. Love it. And then it's probably going to need the developer extension. I don't know if it's going to need the memory extension on here though, because we don't necessarily want Goose to remember this unless it's using the memory for when it last ran. Let's look for, is there anything in here about a date? Update a last run timestamp for future incremental runs. But that's the only thing where it's keeping track of that. So let's go refine this part of this recipe. So we want to update a last run timestamp, store this in a file where the user wants to store their recipes. So we're just going to be really clear about like where we want it to store this this last run date. All right, I think we're good to try it out. Should we try it out? Let's see what this is going to do. Hey Tyler, good to see you in chat. Let's go try and run this. So what I want to do is I'm going to go over to recipes. I'm going to tell it to import a recipe, and it's asking for a deep link, but now we can choose a file. And there's our generator. So let's go open that. And we'll call it cookbook generator. With the zoom level, it's having problems showing me that whole dialog. So I had to zoom out a little bit here. All right, and failed to import the recipe. So it's having some problems. We'll go copy that error. We'll cancel here. We'll go back to our chat, and we need to tell Goose to go fix our recipe. We have errors in the recipe. I'm just going to be more clear here in the cookbook generator recipe that need to be fixed. And then I'm just going to paste in the error. So hopefully it's going to understand, okay, well, let me go look at that YAML file, figure out what needs to be fixed and so on. In this case, so some of the parameters coming in, it requires, it was saying that something was required. Change from name to key to input type and requirement. Okay, so it went through and it hopefully fixed all that for us. So let's try and import that recipe again. And we'll call it cookbook generator. And we'll try and import that. Okay, so we still have an error. So we'll go back to our chat and say, we still have an error. And this is exactly the kind of thing that we would be doing if we were actually vibe coding actual software. You know, it's like, hey, this thing broke. Here's the error message that I got, and it has to go through and reanalyze things. So, but note how far we got as far as what it generated. We had a really high level of success in what it generated because we had that kind of vibe prompting session to kind of get us started here. So I was looking for a correct format for extensions and so on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop it here and say, go analyze your own source code in source block Goose to determine how to best build this recipe. Don't put that path in the cookbook generator recipe for other users, though. It won't have Goose source code to look at later. All right, so Tanya's saying, I thought vibe prompting was different. Different phrase for vibe coding. Yeah, so what I like to do is I like to have conversation about like, let's go figure out what it is we need to do and refine the idea and like challenge me on my thought process, find any gaps in my knowledge. Usually when I'm vibe coding like a big project, like I've got several big projects going on here at home, is I'll go in and say, okay, you're these kinds of experts. I'm not. So challenge my thinking. Don't tell me I'm absolutely right. Make sure that you're asking me questions about areas that I don't know and help me refine what it is I do want. And then give me like a prompt that I can feed back into AI, or go build me like a PRD, like a product requirement document, which GitHub is calling their spec kit. Basically, they've got the whole thing around spec kit. And that's basically what they're doing there, is they're asking you to kind of help refine the idea, and then it'll build you the whole specification. Then you give that to AI, and AI is going to have a much higher chance of success. Yeah. So this is basically me saying, like, go back and help me build a better prompt that I can now give that prompt to AI to get a successful outcome. In this case, we just had this really long conversation before I ever told it, like, go build me the recipe itself. We could have started with like, hey, go start building a recipe and now go refine it, go add this, go add this. But each time it would have to go read that whole recipe all over again. And with actual code bases, it can actually be much worse as far as token usage because there's so much code to go analyze, and the number of tokens based on like fragments of code is actually a lot higher than just having a text conversation and then getting like a final revised prompt to go use. You get a much higher chance of success. I'm actually giving a whole talk about this at a prompt engineering conference in London in a couple of weeks. Tony also asked, does vibe prompting help make what you do more reusable for another time? Not, I mean, it could. I mean, if I were to really refine the idea and say like, hey, now this whole idea actually becomes really reusable, then yes. For what we're doing here, the idea of like coming up with a cookbook generator, this probably isn't something that I'm necessarily going to replicate, you know, and need to make another recipe about how to build another generator. So in this case, no, but it's certainly possible. I mean, the whole idea of what we're building today is that you're going to go through and analyze all my other sessions and figure out what would make a good recipe. So we're being very meta today in the live stream for sure. All right, so it says it fixed more things. Let's try and import that again. Thank you for all the questions, by the way. These are great questions. Keep asking if you got more. Let's try and import that recipe again. I love that the team built in a file selector here that we don't just have to use the deep link. All right, it looks like it grabbed a title this time. I didn't have to paste anything in there. Hey, the recipe imported successfully. All right, so let's go use it. So the idea here is you could all go import this. Let's go see what that user experience is going to look like. When you click on use, it actually starts a whole new Goose session. So let me pull that over here. It's activating our extensions for us. Recipe warning, you're about to execute a recipe you haven't run before. Only proceed if you trust the source. You can trust me. But it's telling you exactly what's going on in here. And it's prompting you here. Do you want to trust and execute this recipe? In this case, yep. Let me zoom in a little bit. And so here's the prompt that it sort of pre-populated for us here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to send this over. And so it's saying like, ask me where I want to store the recipes and so on. And now we're having a conversation with Goose about go build my own personal cookbook of recipes. Let's start by finding your Goose session files. So now it's looking for where to find those things. And if it can't find it, it should be prompting us because we did have that in the instructions that if you can't find it yourself, ask the user. I'm hoping it's going to find it under .local. It's looking under library. It's not going to be there. It's looking under config. It's not going to be there. So I'm hoping a Goose is going to be smart enough. Oh, it's asking me for, you know, permission to start scanning my file system. So it would be nice if Goose had a little bit of knowledge of where it's storing its own files. Like where do I store my sessions? Let me go look there. It would be nice if that was actually baked in. Lol, you can trust me. Wait, you don't trust me with the recipes I make? I'm a good cook. You can trust. There's a joke I heard as a kid. It said, never trust a skinny cook. Coffee. All right, so it's going through. It looks like it's having problems finding the path for our sessions. So it's probably going to stop at some point and go, hey, where are your sessions? So I'm actually going to queue up a message here and say, my sessions should be stored under under my home folder .local. Yeah, looks like it's looking for other things. Local/share Goose sessions. And what we can do now in Goose is we can actually queue up these messages. And so while it's still working, we're saying, by the way, here's the next thing I want you to kind of take a look at. So if it ever does pause, then we can say, oh, you have a rich history. Looks like it found it. Okay, so it found it on its own. So now I can actually cancel that message. So it found found everything. So now it's going to go through and try to build everything. It would have been nicer if it prompted us a little sooner, or if it, again, had awareness of like, where am I storing my own sessions? If it could kind of peek at its own settings or whatever to know like where those things were being stored, that was platform aware. Like, oh, you're on Windows, it's stored here. You're on Mac, it's stored here. Or you're on Linux, it's stored here. It would be nice if it could automatically do that for us. Found the Goose sessions. Italian cooking research, API analysis, okay, database queries, workshop planning, YouTube transcription, web development projects. Okay, so next steps. Before we begin, I need to know, where would you like to store them? Yes, we're gonna put them in here. So store them in that folder. All right, so analysis scope, analyze all 70, focus on recent ones, do all sessions, but ignore any about the recipe security scanner, because again, those just got really repetitive, and so I'm going to tell it to skip those, because those were also much longer conversations. And then should I automatically redact file paths? So we'll say turn file paths into parameters for me. Shouldn't be any API keys in my sessions. I don't typically put those things into sessions to go out to LLMs anyway. And that was it. That's all it needed to ask us for. So 3 questions for the user. Let's go see what it builds. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go over to my editor here, and we'll see what it's going to generate. We should see some other files populating here. I'm kind of curious what it's going to come up with. Now, it will take a fair chunk of tokens, depending on how many sessions you have and how big those sessions are. It has to kind of tokenize all of those and process all of those through the LLM and look for those repetitions and so on. So this stage of what it is we're doing will actually be pretty token heavy. But that's to be expected because we're analyzing large amounts of data. And so you may want to use an LLM, either like a local LLM where it's not going to cost you anything, or use an LLM where you have like a high number of tokens that you can use relatively inexpensively. Because for me, if we go out to that path, we go to local Goose, local share Goose sessions. I got a lot of files in here. I have some 0-byte files, but you know, I see one that's already like 700 kilobytes. You know, that's huge. If I do LAS, capital S, like I've got some sessions in here that are 2 megabytes, 1.6, 1.6, 1.4. Like this is a lot of data for sure. You can do a DU dash. It should give us a human readable. I've got 61 megabytes of session data that this is going to have to go through and analyze and tokenize and try to figure out like what's in this session. And so I told it like, go skip the security scanner that I built, but it still has to kind of read through that file to go, oh, this is about the security thing. I need to skip it. It needs to read it to begin with. And so this will actually be very token heavy for what I'm doing. But the end result of this is that it should start building out some recipes for us here. So session analysis looks like it built a folder to kind of analyze things while it's working. There's nothing in there yet, but if we go back over to Goose and see what Goose is actually doing. All right, so exporting a few sample things, create task parameters, execute task IDs. So the fact that this gave us task IDs has me wondering if this is actually going to start launching subagents now to go analyze like a whole bunch of files at a time. So the nice thing about Goose is it can actually go run 10 tasks in the background. So I'm wondering whether it's actually going to use subagents for this. That would be pretty handy if it did. Anyway, this could take a little while, but I think we've got a high chance of success as far as what we've designed and what we've built here. This live stream's gone on almost an hour, so I'm going to call it. Thanks again for the questions. Definitely, please go check out our Hacktoberfest. I'm going to go put that banner back up. Definitely go check that out. And once this finishes running, I'm going to kind of go back through. I'm going to clean up that generator, and I'm going to make a pull request to our own community cookbook. And if any of you want to try this out, you can definitely DM me on Discord and try it out. So let me get that back up here. So again, GitHub block Goose issues 4705. Actually, let me pull that up in a browser here and show you what's going on there. Oops. All right, so here's our Hacktoberfest. Again, shout out to the team for going through and building this out. Did I pause again? Looks like my camera froze again, maybe. Looks like my camera froze. I'm still here, I promise. All right, but yeah, big shout out to the team for building out our Hacktoberfest. Definitely go check that out. Let me zoom in on it a little bit here. So we've definitely got lots going on. There's a whole list of tasks here that you can choose from that are linked over to issues. Everything from adding new prompts to our prompt library to adding documentation, any kind of content you want to build us a blog post or a video. We'd love to see what you come up with on those. If you want to come up with more recipes. So there's lots of little challenges going on. You can definitely check all these out. So again, huge thank you to the team for building these out. Looks like my camera unfroze. So yeah, definitely go check that out and let us know what you come up with. We'd love to see your contributions on this. Our team is basically watching for your contributions. So come help us out with Hacktoberfest. And we've got a swag shop as well. Tanya, can you drop the link to our swag shop? I forget if it was in here in the first place. Let me see if it's in here real quick. Doesn't look like it. Is anybody on the team, if you can drop that in chat if we have that. But basically, we're looking for contributions here, and we've got some fun swag that we're going to be awarding as prizes. So we'll definitely keep you updated on that. Definitely go check out our Discord community. And we'll catch you in the next stream. So next week, Ebony is going to be on the live stream and doing a vibe code session similar to this. Probably not building like recipes and cookbooks, but every week someone on the team is going to rotate through. We want someone to come in every Thursday or 3 or 4 Thursdays of the month and show you how we do vibe coding, what our prompt kind of process is, how we prompt, how we go back and like refactor and refine things kind of as we go. Thank you, Rizal. Ebony is going to be doing a vibe code about MCP UI, which is a fantastic tool. I haven't dug into it at all, but having, being able to call out to data and actually see like data like visualized and so on right in your Goose session is pretty powerful. We've had that on some of our live streams, and we've got some stuff on YouTube about it that you can go check out for sure. And to close us off, we've got a whole coming up next. We've got like 2 weeks of events packed into a little video, so please stick around for that and go check out all the events that we have going on. We've got a team over in London right now that's got a hour that's probably happening like right now, but definitely go check out the upcoming events. We're going to be at a ton of conferences this month, so if you're at any of the tech conferences that you see in this little video, please come say hi to us. We'd love to kind of meet and interact with everybody that's using Goose, and we'll catch you next week in the live stream. Cheers.